Hello and welcome to the first edition of Mad, Bad and Downright Strange Podcast, where I will be inviting bloggers, filmmakers and fellow film junkies to help me work through the 1001 film introduction to cult and obscure cinema that is the Mad, Bad and Downright Strange list. Joining me for this premiere edition is the owner of the Deadly Dollhouse of Horror Nonsense, as well as one half of the Feminine Critique podcast. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to studio this evening, Emily.
Hey, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming and joining me for this premiere edition.
Not a problem. I wish you could have, flown me over to your side of the world, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, and maybe in a future edition we can fly people over here, but
Once the budget gets bigger and craft service improves.
yes. So, well, for now, as I said, with the magic of internet, it's uniting us all, and as I said, it's nice to actually finally be able to do this, because we've been sort of corresponding back and forth on the blogs for, I think it's about 5 years now.
Almost, I would say, because I think I'm coming up on my 5th year anniversary. I think you get to the point where time, I think once you get past college, years don't matter anymore. So suddenly you look back and you're like, I've been doing this 5 years, and that's scary. But then it doesn't matter. So
I think this is this thing. I remember looking at my amount of posts I've done. It was like 395. And I'm thinking, have I really reviewed 395 movies since I started?
Yeah.
But it's still fun. I don't know about yourself. Are you still enjoying blogging? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think the nature of it's changed a little bit, and I have a theory for why, which I think, I don't know if you've noticed the same thing. There's a lot less commenting on blogs. Whereas when I started, there was, almost every one of my reviews, I would get a post, a comment here and there. Sometimes it'd go on, you'd have a conversation. There's a lot less of that, but I think a big part of that is that more and more people read stuff on their cell phone. It's much harder to actually comment on a cell phone, especially with certain sites and everything else. So I think the readership, is still there. I think people are still engaging, and just not in the same... Not with as much work as they used to.
I totally understand what you mean. It is a bit depressing at times when you put your time and effort into a piece and then you don't think anyone's reading it because you don't get that sort of feedback.
Right. You can see okay, I had a lot of hits here, but why isn't anybody talking to me about it?
That's the thing. You see the hits going up and you're like, is this all spam? Is this people reading? Or people not knowing how to use Google correctly? Mm-hmm. But no, as I said, I don't know if it's the same for yourself, but do you feel that video sort of bloggers have taken away from the more traditional written style blogging?
Not specifically, because I think the audience for that is always going to be very separate. For me, I like to read a lot of blogs because it's an enjoyable reading thing. Whereas when am I going to watch them? If I'm commute, let's say if I'm on my commute and I have my phone up, if I'm trying to watch a video, it's going to be very tough because it's going to keep buffering. If I'm at work and I'm, on my lunch, I can read a blog, but I can't watch it because I don't really have video enabled there. Yeah. So, for me, I'm, I like reading, and the blogs I read are ones that I respect and that are written well. So I think it's a lot of the people who started blogging because they loved movies as opposed to because they loved writing about movies that a lot of times go into video, which is fine, because I think if you're better at talking, then talk. That's fine, because there's an audience for that. So I think they're separate.
I feel that a lot of times with the video bloggers, because they are so numerous, it's so hard to find the good video bloggers.
Yeah.
A lot of the old guard, people like the Nostalgia Critic, Spoonie, they've sort of, I don't know if they got caught up in their own hype, but they seem to have lost their way slightly, it feels to myself. There's very few. I think Nostalgia Chick is probably one of the few that is still sort of worth watching, but there's so many which is basically just some guy or girl sitting there and reading IMDb in front of their webcam. And you feel that it's kind of like a slap in the face when they're getting 5,000 hits for them doing that, and they're trying to think of something witty to write down each time.
Yeah, and it's harder because if you do that, then you have to either be really good at doing it spur of the moment and naturally, or else you've written it and are reading it and then have to be good at reading as if you're not actually reading. So I would much rather at that point read a review that somebody took the time to write and then edit and proofread and, you know.
Yeah, you can normally tell the people who have got it on the board in front of them as you can follow their head moving along.
Yep.
But one of the things I always like questioned for people who write genre specific, I mean, in your case, it's a horror blog. What is the appeal of obviously writing just purely about horror films?
It started as I have always been a horror movie fan, and I have always been a writer of sorts. And like I think many people who write a lot when they're younger and go to college and write and, you know, decide they're going to come out of the world and write and then come out of the world and, you know, have a hard time finding a job where they write much. It became kind of a sort of way for me to, like, warm up again and get creatively writing. So I started that about 5 years ago. And actually now in my, like, real job, I do write, but it's very different from horror blogging. But there was that kind of sense of, like, you know, not that I had writer's block, I hate that term, but that I knew I love writing, I can write, but I wasn't writing. And because anytime I kind of tried to write something, I just kind of fizzled out. So I figured, oh, wait a minute, here's something that I'm really passionate about. At that time, there was a lot of, I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and there was a couple of forums that were big, so that, you know, had these kind of like thriving movie communities. So I used to, you know, go to them a lot. And it just kind of became like I could do this. You don't need too much technical savvy to watch a movie and, you know, post a simple review of it. And it really helped me get writing again. And since then, I've loved it. I've made quite a lot of friends from doing it. I've, you know, made very good friends who've, you know, have come to my wedding and such. Because there is a whole community of genre film fans who are generally pretty cool people when you get to meet them.
I think it is a good community that still exists within the blogging community, certainly.
Yes, yes.
I think we only needed to, even when you look at this project that we've obviously put together, we've put together this 1001 list, mainly because the guys who did the 1001 movies to see before you die, I think they managed 150 for their cult film, which with cult cinema it's sort of only touched the surface. So obviously when compiling it was just a case of sending out emails like yourself and other bloggers, and the fact that the community came together and helped compile this list.
Yep.
Which I don't like to say is essential. I prefer to call it as an introduction, because the word essential tends to get you into disagreements with what people class as being essential.
Well, movie fans tend to be a little opinionated too. That never helps.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that brings me on to my next point. As obviously a female blogger, especially in the horror community, do you find it a harder community to sort of break into than if you were another guy writing about horror films?
No, I think there's probably, in some ways, yeah, some ways, no. I find, especially when I first started blogging, there seems to actually be more female bloggers that I tend to find. It's not so true anymore. I think it's kind of probably half and half. The problem that kind of sometimes happens is I think a lot of female bloggers, and especially female horror fans, tend to feel as though they have that, because there's something about, oh, when you're a female writing about horror, you're going to get more attention because you seem like a rarity. Really, I don't think we are. I think there's so many female horror fans out there doing this. But I think there are some females that then kind of feel like, oh, well, now I can, you know, push the fact that I'm a woman and use that to, you know, really sell myself. And, I mean, that's fine if you can support it, I guess. But I found ultimately it's become very gender neutral for me, I think. You know, occasionally if I'm writing, the fact that I'm a woman is going to be a thing if I'm depending on the movie or depending on my opinion of it. But I think overall, I don't think there's necessarily a sexism out there. It occasionally pops up, and usually it's shot down pretty quickly. You know, you see things out there, but I've gotten far less, and I've never, ever had a comment on my blog of like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you're a woman, or anything to that extent. So
that's good to hear. So, well, I guess it's the only place to go now is obviously into our feature discussion tonight. uh, which we've chosen a film which is, I know, is one of your personal favorites, and again, it is one of mine. Tonight we're going to be talking about Starship Troopers.
Would you like to know more?
Starship Troopers, if you're not in the know, it's a 1997 American military science fiction action film, according to IMDb.
Sure. Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
We won't just classify it as a sci-fi movie. We'll call it a military science action film.
An American military science fiction action film.
Directed by that crazy Dane Paul Verhoeven. It is the story of three school friends who sign up, join the military in a sort of a future which is now where power is seen as the dominant force. Pacifism has been pretty much wiped out, and it is all about raw force being the dominant power. We basically follow these three friends as they go off into their various threads of the military. We've got young Rico, who goes off and joins the mobile infantry. And we've got his girlfriend, Carmen, who goes off to be a pilot, and then we've got his best friend, Carl Jenkins, who's played by Neil Patrick Harris, who's probably now best off known for How I Met Your Mother, and he's going off to be a military bigwig and going off into intelligence. As we follow the three, they're caught up in the war between the arachnids, who are a bug sort of race on the planet of Plandafu, who, after launching a meteorite into Earth and causing untold death, sparks an intergalactic war, as we now follow the three friends as they're all caught up in the war in their own way, as we really follow Johnny Rico as he progresses through the ranks and goes from a green marine to a grizzled war veteran. Okay, Emily, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Sure. So the movie came out in 1997. I had the pleasure of seeing it in the theater. I was 15 at the time. And I remember sitting, watching this movie. I think I saw it with my parents, leaving the theater and being like, fuck yeah, that was so good. I loved it. I thought it was funny. I thought it was also really gross and had great bug shootings. But I walked out thinking, this is an amazing satire about war and society and war. And I remember even then at 15, I was a film nerd, and reading all these reviews that were pretty negative to the film. The film, I don't know that it flopped, but it did not do well in the theaters, considering it was a very big budgeted movie. And for years after, I remember people talking about Starship Troopers as if it was, oh yeah, that's that stupid bug movie with all those like really dumb 90210 actors. And I am glad finally, I think, the film finally has found its respect of anybody who watched the film saying, oh, no, it is totally a satire. But it took a really long time for that to be common knowledge. And I still, I remember telling somebody I work with to see it, and they did. And I'm like, so what'd you think? And they were like, I don't know. I mean, the acting was so bad. And it still just boggles me because I think it is so brilliantly done, and Verhoeven has made basically he makes an anti-war. He does the thing that I think was it Truffaut who said you can't make an anti-war film because the very nature of film, when you put war on film, it's going to look exciting. And what Verhoeven goes at it with, instead of making a war movie and preaching that war is bad, I am just going to play it straight-faced and make a war movie where the villains are so ridiculous and disgusting because they're bugs, and our heroes are so beautiful and perfect, and and you're going to walk out of that movie and you're going to hopefully get that this is the way war is sold to people. And most people didn't get that, so
it did take a long time. I think it's the last couple of years, as you said, that people have now praising it as this amazing satire. And I don't know if it's obviously the change in political climate that's obviously sparked people's opinion of this film and sort of changed it. But certainly, like yourself, when it came out, again, I was 15. Over here in the UK, it was released as a 15. So with the rating
it was rated
structure.
R in the States, which is about the equivalent. You guys have one extra rating, I think.
Because, it was 15, so you obviously got to be 15 or over. And again, I went with my dad. And you go in and 15 rating, you get some violence, but it's certainly not as strong as an 18. And within the first 5 minutes, we've got people being teared limb from limb. There's like extreme
It's an ugly planet. A bug planet.
I love that opening. I'm so glad that you did that opening because I actually renewed my Netflix subscription just to rewatch this movie because I've misplaced my VHS copy somewhere.
Oh, wait, so you haven't watched it with the commentaries?
I haven't watched it with the commentaries, no.
Do yourself a favor, get it on DVD or Blu-ray. There are, on the Blu-ray, there's 2 commentary tracks, one of which is Paul Verhoeven and the screenwriter, Edward Neumeier. And that one's brilliant just because to hear them talk about it is fascinating. The other one I actually watched most of today is Paul Verhoeven with Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, and Neil Patrick Harris. And it's also really good because it's really fun just to, again, like it seemed like a pretty fun shoot. The 3 actors are actually very fun to listen to talk. But even they got it. I don't know if Denise Richards got it, but the other actors got it.
Denise Richards, she sort of sleepwalks her way through this film.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, we can jump into this because I think Denise Richards in this movie and how she's perceived is really fascinating for a few reasons. One is that I remember even me leaving the theater and hating her, thinking terrible actress, terrible character. Oh, I hate her. Watching it, as an adult now, 20 years later, whatever it is, what's fascinating is that I should not hate her at all. I do because I think Denise Richards is just a terrible actress, and I don't think she's smart enough to make her playing it so blankly work.
I hated her more the second time. I didn't hate her when I originally watched it. I don't know if obviously because she was still new and fresh-faced at the time, so I don't know, maybe my teenage hormones were in overdrive or something there.
I'm not judging.
But this time it's sort of like, oh my god, I absolutely hate this character so much.
Because you feel like most of the other actors get it. But the thing about Carmen is, watching it now, I'm like, Carmen's actually a great character. Because the whole thing about her is that Johnny is so in love with her and is willing to go into the army for her. But she's like, look, I've wanted to be a pilot my whole life. This is my dream. I'm not going to give that up for you. I'm not going to pretend to be in love with you, and I'm not. Oh, I'm kind of attracted to this guy. Maybe I'll see where that goes. Like, she's actually a really modern woman. There's nothing wrong with a female character being interested in more than one man. No. But yet and I don't know, and they talk about it a lot in the commentaries, how the test audiences after, like, the first screening of this movie, were shouting, kill the bitch, kill the slut about Denise Richards' character. And Paul Verhoeven says, he's like, they never would have done that in Europe. There's something really offensive to Americans about a female character who's so not promiscuous, because it's not that, but who's just open, I guess. But the problem still, and I want to just think, oh, it's because society just really can't handle that. But I think it's also that Denise Richards is really bad.
I think the thing which annoyed me, especially about her, it's great, as you said, you point out the fact that she is a modern woman. She obviously switches from Johnny Rico to her instructor, who, again, is about as vacuous as she is.
Yep.
But when she does the breakup video, and it only now did I realize it when I watched it before we did this podcast, it looks like you're watching a telemarketing campaign. You watch Johnny Rico's video, and he's there, and he's got his friends slapping their ass, and God knows what else in the background. She's filming one scene, and then it cuts to her walking to this view of these 2 planets, and going, look at this view. It's like, you have production values for your breakup video?
Well, that's something about the future of this movie that I really love, and it's something I never caught until they talk about it in one of the commentary tracks, is the way, and again, it's very telling, because this movie's 97. The internet was around at the time, not quite as, big as it is now, but when they separate, and she says, oh, write me, and they never actually write. They send videos. Like, that in this future, that is writing. Like, there's no more culture in any way because of this, kind of gung-ho war society.
But, it's... But Verhoeven, when he's approached films, it always seems to have been he's always sort of carried his style across, whereas other directors, such as like John Woo, they've adapted their style to become more sort of mainstream with Hollywood. He never changed his style.
And I love him for it.
I think that's very clear when you look at the co-ed shower sequence, which, again, going back to my point earlier, when this was released in the UK, this is a 15. You don't get nudity in a 15.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, we've got gratuitous violence, and now we've got gratuitous nudity, which, obviously, when you're watching this with your dad, you don't know. Are you supposed to be, like, celebrating this fact? Or you're supposed to go, oh, no, that's shameful. You know, all these naked...
Like, I want to live in the future and shower with chicks.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about that scene is that when they were shooting it, they actually dared Verhoeven and I think his production assistant to shoot it naked, which he happily obliged to do.
Well, if you've seen, especially his, not even just his earlier stuff, if you've seen quite a few Verhoeven, like Black Book, which was more recent, some of his stuff with Rutger Hauer, I can't remember the name of this movie. It's like it's a movie he did in like late 70s with Rutger Hauer. And I mean, then even like Basic Instinct, Verhoeven makes really sexy movies, and he also is very comfortable with sex and nudity on camera. I think he's comfortable with it in a way that, I mean, it can't, like, sure, in Basic Instinct, it's gratuitous that the nudity is a big part of the movie, but I think it's also because, well, of course that character would be nude at this moment.
Yeah.
And of course, in this future where men and women are kind of considered on the same level and can go into mobile infantry and die together, of course they shower together. There's no more genderisms here. And so I think it makes perfect sense to have somebody who's very comfortable with nudity treat it the way he does in the movie.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I've not seen any of his sort of Dutch films. I haven't seen, obviously, like Soldier of Orange, which you mentioned.
Oh, that's the one,
previously.
Yes.
But I've seen his American films. So I've obviously grew up watching things like RoboCop, which, again, more gratuitous violence.
And it's also the same writer as this one.
Yes, the writer actually turns up. Do you know, when they have the trial for the
Yes.
person put in death, that's the writer of the movie.
I know, it's awesome.
When the film tanked, I don't know if they replicated that trial or not, but that's for
Well,
you.
they let him come back for Starship Troopers 3. Ed Neumeier wrote and directed Starship Troopers 3, which is actually really worth watching. Skip 2. 2 is a straight-to-video, doesn't understand what worked about this one and just makes it into an action movie.
Yeah.
But Starship Troopers 3 is actually the same kind of satirical bent, and it takes on religion. So if you're interested in religion being kind of lampooned by the Starship Troopers universe, then check out part 3.
I haven't, as I said, I've seen all the other ones. Obviously, as you said, Starship Troopers 2 is more the enemy within. But obviously, because it's made on a smaller budget, they had to scale it down. Starship Troopers 3...
They had to reuse actors from the first one.
Starship Troopers 3, the first half I really enjoyed. And then when it's just basically them walking along the beach, I kind of got a bit bored.
Okay. Did you get to you finished it though, right?
Yeah, I finished it and saw
to be like the final scene makes that movie worth watching.
With the huge bug.
No, the like montage at the end, the commercial at the very end of the movie.
I'm gonna have to go back and refresh myself now.
Okay. Because it is like the movie ends and you're kind of almost like you feel like it kind of chickened out, but then it has this one final "Would you like to know more?" sequence that sort of puts the entire film in perspective.
But it's one of those few series where they've actually developed it really well. We've obviously had the animated fourth film,
which I did not see.
It's all right. If you like Roughnecks, which was the spin-off series, which Starship Troopers for kids. Which is more based around the book than the film.
Which I've also not read. Have you read?
The book's a lot more dry. It's not as much fun as this film.
Yeah, well, and the book is, to my understanding, the book is writing in a way that's kind of celebrating fascism and militarism.
I know that Verhoeven actually admits he didn't finish the book past the first chapter, so...
Well, because I believe Robert Heinlein, complicated guy, but I think... Nazi sympathizer wouldn't be wrong to suggest about him, is my understanding.
Well, there's a lot of iconography within it. You've obviously got like the Eagle standard within the badge of the mobile infantry.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And obviously when you look at like the classroom sequence, and you've got obviously all the pictures of all these sort of figures on there. I'm just trying to find my notes because I just put this down. Yeah, I mean.
Well, yeah, and I mean Verhoeven grew up in. He grew up with World War II. He was, and Black Book is very much about not his experiences, but Black Book is his kind of way of really telling the story of his area during that time. So, I mean, this movie is, and Verhoeven talked a lot about it in the commentary, that, yeah, this was his way of making a war film and making it in such a way where it's, you know, so over the top that it should make you think. Something I didn't pick up on until very recently. Our characters are from Buenos Aires, which, when you think Buenos Aires, you totally think Denise Richards and, Casper Van Dien. At first, I always just assumed it was kind of a joke because that's probably where they were in the book. So, but he's just going to cast really white actors in the parts. Casper Van Dien, I think it was, actually brings it up in the commentary. He's like, well, because he says the same thing. He's like, I didn't understand why I was supposed to be from Buenos Aires. But then I thought about it and realized, oh, where did all the escaped Nazis go? Buenos Aires. So the idea being that maybe this whole generation of really Caucasian Buenos Argentinians are all descendants of Nazis, which I like that idea quite a bit.
It's because I wasn't sure that was another thing carried over from the book, and they just sort of worked it in, then we all kind of accepted it. But I never thought of obviously the way you've just brought it up.
Yeah, that was the first time I thought about it, was today with that commentary.
But I'm sure I remember reading that because of in the book, I think that Rico's actually is Hispanic in the book, and that's why he's from Buenos Aires. Right. Again, there's so many different sort of theories of what it could obviously be all mean. But as I said, I love the idea that pacifism is now seen as weakness, and that only by getting behind the government and joining the military do you become a citizen.
Yep.
When they got that opening discussion when they're in the classroom with Michael Ironside, who is absolutely fantastic in this film. Well,
the fact that this movie has Michael Ironside and Clancy Brown just means Paul Verhoeven really does love me, because those are two of my favorite actors and favorite weird crushes, and to have them both in this movie is just so great.
It was a fanboy overload. I think if if Michael Ironside or Clancy Brown is in your movie, it just escalates it that way.
It does. Even if the rest of it's shit, they will. Pet Sematary 2 is a terrible movie, but damn it, Clancy Brown deserves an Oscar for what he does in that movie.
I love Clancy Brown. The fact is that he is so believable in this film that that he would bust himself down. If this was a real life situation, he would bust himself down to private, and he would go and take on all the bugs by himself.
And he would be the one that captures the brain bug.
Because obviously, again, because he's a character actor like Michael Ironside, so when I see Clancy Brown, I just think of Highlander, because I think he's the Krugen still. And maybe to a lesser extent as the televangelist on John Dies at the End.
Which I have not seen yet.
Oh, you're missing a treat there.
Been on my queue forever, and I just keep not getting to it.
Yeah, John Dies at the End, really, really good. We might have to cover it on another edition. But that whole opening sequence where Michael Ironside, and he's like, oh, what would the founding fathers of Hiroshima have to say? And she's like, oh, they wouldn't have much to say because they were vaporized. It's just, I just love this idea that by doing military service, you become a citizen. So you're deemed a worthy member of society. So you get privileges such as you can have children, you can vote, you can go to Harvard and have it paid on like the military.
Well, and I guess you can run for office. And the idea being then that all of the political leaders served in the military.
It is interesting when you actually look at the mobile infantry. Every single one of the characters represents a different aspect.
Yes.
It's sort of like you've got the politician, you've got the one who wants the family, the one who wants to go off to college. It's like funny how they all happen to be in the same group.
Yeah.
But Clancy Brown, again, is absolutely fantastic as the drill instructor.
Oh, so good.
The fact that he's more than happy to brutalize his own cadets.
Well, and that he's more than happy to throw a knife in Jake Busey's hand.
Yes, Jake Busey, the son of Gary Busey.
Which, I was at a horror convention a few years ago, and on the website it was supposed to be Jake Busey and Gary Busey there. And it was the saddest thing in the world because I walked by the table at one point and Gary Busey was not there. Jake Busey was there, and he had written and taped a sign on his booth that said, "No, my dad's not here. Stop asking."
I can never go to like conventions and actually meet sort of people, because I hear so many like horror stories of like when people have met their heroes and they've just been like absolute jerks.
Yeah.
Or like when you go and you see like the soup Nazi guy from Seinfeld who wants like $40 for like a signed photo.
Well, everybody, they make a living. When I go, it's actually, I generally go more to see my friends there than to see the celebrities. But I'll do it, I'll go, and if I see, somebody that I really respect and really would like to have 2 minutes to say, I loved you in Step Up 3, like that kind of thing. So occasionally, if I see that there's somebody that it's not going to be a long line, and I'm going to be able to get that minute with them. A lot of times it's worth it just because sometimes they're awesome. Clint Howard, super guy. John Cassier, great. Tom Savini is an asshole, and don't ever even attempt to give him your money because he doesn't deserve it for how he treats fans at conventions.
Yeah, I keep hearing that Tom Savini's a jerk. So
yeah, I've never had an interest in giving him my money, but I have witnessed him just be awful at these kinds of things.
So, in terms of obviously going back to this film, obviously when we see like the boot camp sort of sequence, which I think is up there with probably the top 5 boot camp sequences you ever shot.
Like Deadly Laser Tag, of course it is.
Because you've obviously got you got Full Metal Jacket, which is like the definitive boot camp sort of sequence, and then you've got this would be like my close second. Just like I think the cadets arrived and it's like, which of you is going to knock me down? And it's sort of like, not enough to knock him down, he has to break their arm as well.
Yeah, medic.
And then he has like another one run around the bunker, and I thought it was who's the guy who played Robin in Batman? Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell?
I thought it was Chris O'Donnell who he makes run around, but it isn't.
It looks like Chris O'Donnell. I never thought about that.
It's some just no-name actor who actually plays it. But the fact he has his assistant officer chase him around, clubbing him on the legs.
So great.
And then obviously we have the return of Dizzy, played by Dina Meyer. Sorry.
Dina, I think, is it just Meyer?
Dina Meyer, who surprisingly has actually done a lot, because like a lot of people in this film, I thought this was like their one film and they didn't really do anything apart from like Neil Patrick Harris, Denise Richards, who obviously went off and did other things.
There's a lot of the younger cast. You'll see it like is it Seth Gillian, who you meet at the very end of the film. He's the young black cadet who's really gung ho. He was on The Wire for years. Dina Meyer or Dinah Meyer, I don't know, however you say her name. She works quite a lot, and she's done a lot. She was in a couple of the Saw films. She had a long-standing arc on 90210, as did half of the cast of this movie.
Yeah.
But I've always liked her because she does do a lot of genre films. She was in even the Piranha remake she's in. I like her because I think she's very natural in films, and she seems like she physically really gives herself to movies. Like, she always looks the part. And in this movie, like, you could tell, like, she's muscular in this one. I believe that she would be, in the mobile infantry in this movie, as opposed to Denise Richards.
Oh, she is one of the toughest people in the mobile infantry. I'm surprised that she doesn't get made the squad captain. I mean, obviously we've got Rico there, so we're supposed to be rooting for him. But
if she not make it over Busey's son, I don't get.
Busey is 5 seconds of glory where he just basically fouls himself.
Right. Well, he can play the violin, though.
He is the only person in this film who doesn't get promoted. Everyone else gets, like, these incredible promotions. Jay Busey as Ace Levy is still a private at the end of the film.
Well, doesn't he kind of choose that, though? Because I think there's a scene where Rico even kind of offers him to be, after Rico gets promoted, doesn't he, like, asks Jake Busey, and Jake Busey's like, "No, I had my chance.
I think he offers him to be his sergeant, but instead he gives it over to Dizzy.
Right, but I think at some point Jake Busey has a line that kind of says, "I'm only meant to be a private. I don't have the capacity to do anything else," which I think is also kind of a military thing of making a statement of like some of the guys that are just there to be one more body in a way.
Yeah, it's but no, Dizzy again she's another strong female character, which is always good to see. While they are obviously
funny though is, and I realized this a few years ago when I rewatched this for the nth time. In a way, she's actually far less of a kind of modern feminist than Carmen. Because if Rico goes into the military for Carmen, Dizzy kind of goes into the army for Rico.
Yeah, she just stalks him.
Yeah, and I think because Dina Meyer is really likable and the character still is good as a soldier, I think you can kind of not notice it so much. But there's something actually really, in a way, disappointing about the character as a feminist, I guess. And I still wonder if the casting had been reversed, and apparently on the commentary, Dina Meyer says she wanted to be Dizzy, like she was going to audition for Carmen and basically said, "I think I'd be a better Dizzy," that she found that character more interesting. But I think if Dina Meyer played Carmen, I think people would hate that character far less.
Yeah. I think the thing with Dizzy, though, she is a more fun character. I mean, she gets to go down and kick ass and shack up with Rico.
Yeah, she plays that crazy version of rugby handball.
I'm still not sure what's supposed to be going on with that, because because Rico's doing like these incredible flips by, I don't know, superhuman ability, I'm supposed to believe, or something?
Superhuman stunt double ability, I guess.
So
is that a thing in the future?
Because obviously we see him he wins, of course, he being the all-American boy, he wins the final game of their school career. And obviously gets to get the highest go in school and that. And it's interesting the fact that they break Rico down is in the fact that he loses his girlfriend, his family are killed off, and he's just like builds himself back up to this sort of hardened military leader by the end of the film. Obviously, when we were talking about obviously the action sequences, isn't it? Do you think that the action's sort of overblown to sort of take away sort of like the horror of war, or do you think it's just Verhoeven style? I mean, obviously we look at films like Toriko and RoboCop, where the gore is so overblown, and again it is overblown here as there's just limbs flying, there's people gored through by aliens and brains sucked out.
Yeah, well, I think because of the nature of how he's telling the story, because, I mean, you think of war films, and it's that tricky balance between making a war film that makes war look awful or making a war film where you're cheering for someone. And it's hard not to ever watch any movie and not do that. But I think he makes the right choice, because it is so over the top that it's more gross than you're never really feeling. Because I don't think you're really supposed to be feeling, oh God, these poor soldiers. Because part of it too is you have no way of feeling that for the other side. The enemy is so nameless and faceless because they're just bugs, that at the same time, though, I think there's kind of something, like at one point they kind of say something to where, like, we actually are on their planet, so we're invading them, kind of thing. I mean, I think the over-the-topness is also, it's the way he sells the film, is I'm telling an anti-war story with a genre that is never used for this.
Yeah. It is, because obviously, because it's not a horror of war story. It is sort of like a boy's own sort of venture. It's sort of film that you would class with alongside the likes of Where Eagles Dare, The Guns Navarone. It's that sort of war film. And I don't know, with the sort of gore elements, I mean, is this him trying to acknowledge that war is sort of bloody and that, you know, people die and that, or?
Yeah, I would say, because because part of it too, I think a big statement it's making is how we send people to war and how we send young people to die. And tell them that they're doing it for their country, that this is the best thing that they could possibly be doing as as an American or as whatever country it is. And so then to see, okay, and now here you all are, here's 30,000 of you that have landed on this planet. Here's, and I think he even says like that when they land in that big first battle, it was him kind of referencing Normandy. And yeah, you send in troop after troop knowing they're going to die until someone gets through to where they need to get through. Yeah. And you need that just mass death to kind of remind you what war is, which is you have the bureaucrats who are fighting it with paperwork and with decisions, and then you have all of the young people who are going in and actually dying in really terrible ways in this case.
Yeah. I mean, same when you look at the propaganda films, which for me are the real highlights of this whole film.
Oh, yeah. Would
you like to know more? And you've got, like, the kids stomping on the cockroaches, and it's
yes.
like, we're doing our part. And I think the best bit is when you've got the troopers there, and they give guns and live ammunition to school children.
And the kids are fighting over it, and the, soldiers are smiling. And, yeah, it's very much, I think, as far as the movie goes, I think if I had to boil it down to what is this movie about, I think it really is about how we sell war to, the generation that has to physically fight it.
Well, they sell it as that, obviously the Air Forces, there were this invincible fighting force. I mean, when they have the initial invasion, it's countdown to victory.
Right.
Not countdown to we're all massacred.
Yep.
And again, with the bugs, with their obviously knocking asteroids into Earth, do you feel that the bugs actually are doing this intentionally? I mean, do they have some sort of plan to conquer Earth, or we just sort of like happen to be in the way?
I think I'm trying to remember because I'm trying to separate what I feel like I've heard said about the movie to just when you watch it without any of that in your head. And I might be misremembering something because I feel like there is a scene or a line here or there that kind of suggests we invaded them first. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's very telling if that is true. But even around that, we do, in the movie, most of it's being fought on their planets. So even if they did bomb Buenos Aires, whether they did or not, whether they did intentionally. I mean, we see later that they are smart, that there is an intelligence to them. I think that's another, I think, kind of little satirical jab in the film. There's one of those like talking heads where you have two intellectuals arguing about whether the bugs are smart. And and it's that same, I think you see the same thing with the way people feel about terrorists is you want to, they kind of want to sell terrorists as mindless savages. But then if you do that, it makes whoever the people that, your side, let's just say, I'm an American. So I'll just use that analogy of, the people that did 9/11 were just monsters. Except then to say that, it kind of makes America look kind of dumb for not having been able to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it too, is that you have the bureaucrats who will not acknowledge that their enemy has any reason for fighting on their end, there's that. It's so much easier to fight a war if you can't see the other side. And when there are bugs that don't communicate, well, then, of course we can just step on them.
It seemed to be, obviously, with the fact that we're going against an alien race we consider to be primitive in this film, who obviously turn out not to be because they've got their own sort of organization structure, that in a way it seems like there's been comparisons drawn, I'm guessing more towards Vietnam because of the time the book was written, but obviously now when we look at the war in Afghanistan, where we've obviously gone in with this idea because we're sort of from a more developed society, and then we've got all this expensive equipment that we're just going to roll in and take over, and we're going to be this whole conquering force, which
right. And there's a mention too of I think they're Mormons. They mention a what do you call it? When a religious group goes to another country to
crusade?
not necessarily a crusade, more they mention how they find one of the planets where there's just a whole missionaries,
Right.
that there are missionaries going to a bug planet to, convert the bugs, and it's the exact idea of, well, who the F are you to go put your religion, it's imperialism, and in this case, it's religious imperialism.
Yeah.
That's one more aspect of something that we're doing. The bugs aren't doing that.
I really want to know how they thought that plan was going to work.
Right.
I mean, do you just knock on the cave of the bugs, and it's sort of we've come to talk to you about.
Pamphlets.
Yeah, it's sort of how am I supposed to read this? I don't have hands.
Right. Yeah. I have 8 eyes. Which one do I focus on?
Yeah, it's sort of they thought that they could turn them. They were wrong.
Right. I want that movie.
Butchered everywhere. Maybe
that'll be the next sequel.
But no, I mean certainly again when you look at things like Roughnecks, which is the series which spawned off. As we were saying earlier, it's Starship Troopers, but for kids. They look at a lot of different aspects. They look at things like robot troopers. There's different sort of bugs that come in, and there's more sort of an in-depth look at how the arachnids sort of work and how they sort of move about from planet to planet, which obviously isn't covered in this film because we've only got so much runtime to get your ideas down on.
Right.
But I mean, do you feel that the sort of sequels add to it, or do you think they take away and this is from this film, or do you prefer just to see it as a single entity?
I mean, I think the third one adds to it because I think the third one being also from the mind of Ed Neumeyer. So I think the third one you have a very clear thematic and tonal continuation. And I also kind of feel like Starship Troopers is about the government selling war, and Starship Troopers 3 is about religion selling itself, and in this case, selling war and everything else. Part 2 to me, and I only saw part 2 once, and at this point it's probably been about 10 years ago. So I recall it just being a very straight action movie, and I think if they had kept making those movies, I think that would have hurt the first film a little bit, because it would have then felt like, oh yeah, that's it's any franchise where the first film is so much better than everything that comes after it.
Yeah.
It ends up kind of bringing that first one down sometimes. So I think if they had kept going that route and just because it's very easy. I mean, I'm surprised they haven't done more straight to video like Universal Soldier. Like, why not? You have a property, you have so many different stories you can tell in this universe. Sure, make a quick action movie, film it in Romania, wherever you can film cheap, and knock it out, put it on DVD, film 3 of them at a time.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
glad.
That's the Albert Perrin way of filmmaking to film 3 films at once.
Right. Get Dolph Lundgren in a few of them. I'm really glad they didn't do that because, I think the third one to me really does pull it back of giving you that intellectual look at it. I mean, I would love to have more. I was devastated in 1997 when this film bombed because I really wanted a sequel right away. In fairness, it's probably best that in a way that happened because I think it let this movie be a cult movie.
Yeah.
It's one of those bizarre cult movies because it was made for, $60 million or whatever it was at the time. But it is a big budget cult movie.
I didn't know, because at the time, obviously, when it was released, I don't think I was concerned with how much films were making and how that affected, obviously, how sequels came out. I just saw, obviously, a film came out, and then if another one came out, it was gravy. And obviously, when this film came out, it then soon very much became the film that everyone in school was talking about, mainly because it's a 15 and you're seeing stuff that you should only see in a 15.
It's all because
get away with it.
Let's face it.
You didn't have to I think in the States you can go and see restricted if you take a grown-up or a homeless person with you or something. I think that's how it works. Is that right?
If the ticket checkers actually check, then yes.
Oh, okay. And obviously it very much became that if you were having friends over, that you would have takeout and you would watch Starship Troopers.
Nice.
And there were normally one or two of you who've probably got more open-minded parents who got you the video, and you would pass it around your friends, and it became very much this cult movie, very much the same way that Aliens did. Mm-hmm. Which again,
and it's a perfect double viewing too.
Again, Aliens is the Vietnam War in space, so very easy to compare the two. And as I said, it is it's wonderful on its own, and it's only added to by the films and the series that came after it. And I think it's nice the fact that it has held up, and people are obviously starting to go back and look at it.
And you know what holds up too? The CGI holds up really well.
It does. There is some actual physical models that they use in production.
But all the bugs are computers, and I mean, most of the time, these young actors most of them whom hadn't done much movies, are interacting with nothing. But all of those bugs are CGI, and they look really good in 2014, and better than many films made in 2005 and after.
I think that's the thing, because when we do CGI, we tend to have the tendency to just do it so cheap. Whereas with Japanese films and sort of a lot of the Asian films, if they do CGI, they go all out. You look at a film like Kashen, which is about 95% CGI. All the backgrounds, a lot of the characters in that are CGI, and it looks absolutely stunning. And you obviously look at other films from like Hollywood and that from the era, and it hasn't aged well. I mean, you look at
the Phantom Menace,
Phantom Menace. I'm thinking more how Reptile looks absolutely wretched now in Mortal Kombat. Lawnmower Man is embarrassing. But it is, as I said, it's good, and I mean, it's a shame Verhoeven didn't return to any of the sequels. As he tends to not do with any of his franchise. He didn't do with obviously Showgirls, which apparently had a sequel.
Sort of, yeah. I haven't watched that, but yeah, it's out there.
Basic Instinct, he didn't return to.
Thank God. Did you see Basic Instinct 2?
I didn't see Basic Instinct 2, but I knew it was going to be awful. So.
You know, I love bad movies. I love, like, if a movie, like, I just watched My Soul to Take, and I wrote probably 2,000 words on it. Like, if a movie's hated, I'm like, I'm going to find something to enjoy about it. There's so little to enjoy about Basic Instinct 2. It's just boring.
I think that's where we show sort of like the critical opinion, sort of like the penny in the pile of poo sort of technique, where we focus on that one good bit, and like everything else can be just absolute garbage. But this bit was rather good.
But there's nothing like that in Basic Instinct 2.
Oh, I was like watching it. It's like it's not Sharon Osbourne, is it? Definitely see her get
that would have been interesting. Sharon Stone, and you know who it is? It's the forget the actor's name, but he ruined The Walking Dead for me, because it's the actor who played the governor in Walking Dead, who I hated so much from Basic Instinct. So when he showed up on Walking Dead, I'm like, great, now I get to hate him here too, and he's awful on both.
You see, I always confuse him with the guy who's in Life on Mars.
I don't know.
He just plays the same role in everything.
Okay.
Obviously, if you know, put it in the comment section below and educate us all.
Yes.
But basically, he plays the same role and everything, and I thought he was pretty much the same guy in Basic Instinct 2, which was another reason to watch it, other than the fact Sharon Stone's far too old and just looking out for a paycheck.
I mean, she looks good naked. I'm not arguing with that, but the movie's
does she? I'll take your word for it.
Especially and apparently when she decided to do the movie, she first got naked and had a bunch of friends come over and was like, "Can I do this? Can I do this?" They were like, "Yeah, you look fine," and she looks good. But oh god, that movie.
But a lot of people bash RoboCop 2, but I enjoyed it.
The RoboCop or RoboCop 2?
RoboCop 2.
I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
I love RoboCop 2. I know people bash it and they say it's not as good as Verhoeven's original, but I like it. So I think it's the one film, if we're talking about Verhoeven sequels that obviously that don't fall into the pattern of the others of being awful, RoboCop 2 would be my exception to the rule. But anything else you want to they feel that we should discuss about this one before we wrap this one up?
I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job of explaining to the world why this movie is so effing good, why it was a travesty that common sense didn't tell you this was a satire.
Then again, we're dealing with society still thinks that 8 American Pie movies is not enough.
That's a good point. That's a very
I mean, who keeps giving money to Noel Clarke to make movies?
Yeah. It is. I guess it's not. This movie exists. I'm so happy that it's out there. The DVDs and the Blu-rays are loaded with special features, including, oddly enough, Denise Richards' screen test, where she's so much more dynamic and engaging. Like, we watched, my husband and I, because he had never seen this movie. When I showed it to him, it was like this moment of, I'm like, because this was way back when in the early stages of us dating, and And it was kind of a deal breaker. I'm not going to lie.
This
He
is
like
the relationship test.
Yeah, I
like,
would
you
not
like this
have
movie or
married
it's
him
over.
if he didn't like it. But we always do. We now have a joke where we do the Denise Richards voice, which is we just kind of picture her filming this movie, and just anytime like, because she has this like smile on her face the whole movie. So in our minds, just the entire movie, she's like, Paul, am I supposed to stand here now, Paul? But in her screen test, she's actually really engaging, and she's not the Denise Richards in the movie. So that's weird. Maybe she was on painkillers for the movie. I don't know.
I don't know. I think this is a good relationship test. You know that you've met that special person.
Oh, yeah.
And if they can appreciate Starship Troopers...
Oh, it's a deal breaker. If somebody... do not marry somebody who doesn't get Starship Troopers, because they're kind of an idiot.
I have a similar test, but I do Godzilla movies.
Oh, okay.
If I'm dating anyone and they don't appreciate Godzilla, or they like turn up and go, "Oh, you like those movies?" It's like, "Oh, really? Yeah, well, I'm not much of a dinner buyer."
Like you, yeah.
Which is obviously when my wife, the first time she stayed over at my apartment, I put on Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, and I was watching that, well, not wanting to obviously wake her up. And she comes out and it's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Oh, I'm watching Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, respect." And she was like, "Oh, really? This is pretty cool." And I was like, "Obviously met a keeper."
Yep. And you proposed the next day.
So, yeah, that was it. That was it. It was like, right, we're moving everything into my apartment. It's the size of a shoebox, and you've come in from a full house, but we're cramming it in there. You're not
all right, it's a way to do it.
But, yeah. Okay, further viewing. Where would you, if you like this movie, what else would you recommend to people?
Okay, well, definitely Starship Troopers 3. I think you can completely skip 2, but I think 3 has the same tone, same writer. A lot of other Verhoeven as well. RoboCop, definitely. Again, RoboCop is also the same writer, so you have that good teamwork thing going. Total Recall and this movie, to me, go very well together. Also, you have a lot of the same cast. You get more Michael Ironside, which is always good.
Yes.
And then, separate from just the kind of same universe of actors and behind the camera, I was trying to think about this, and I couldn't come up with any good kind of satirical war movies. But if you like big bug movies, I would recommend a little horror comedy that came out a few years ago called Infestation.
All right, that's one that I've not heard anyone else mention, so good.
It was on Instant Watch on Netflix. It might be over by you, I'm not sure. It pops up on the Sci-Fi Channel a lot over, at least when I'm flipping around.
Yeah.
It's just a good killer big bug movie, and it's pretty funny, and it has Ray Wise, which always elevates things as well. He's no Clancy Brown, but still.
No Clancy Brown. Who is?
Nobody. Michael Ironside and Clancy Brown, don't make me choose between them.
Well, you know Clancy Brown's in SpongeBob SquarePants now.
Yes. Have you seen the documentary, I Know That Voice?
No, I haven't.
Good documentary. It is called I Know That Voice. Again, in the States, it's on Netflix Instant. It is just a documentary about voiceover acting.
Okay.
Clancy Brown is interviewed. Everybody is interviewed that does a lot of voiceover work, and it's really fun to watch and hear them talk about. So.
Cool. For me, the only film that I've been thinking of that you've not mentioned already would obviously be Aliens.
Yes.
If you, as you said before, is a great double bill to watch with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's if you're obviously you enjoy watching one movie with people slaughtering alien races, then this is another good comparison. So.
And as you say that too, I would say something Verhoeven and James Cameron have in common too is they both really like strong, kick-ass women.
They do.
And both of their catalogs, you're always going to have really strong, and especially in Verhoeven's case, really interesting female characters.
Well, James Cameron's got the human chameleon, Jeanette Goldstein.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Who we all remember as Vasquez.
Mm-hmm.
He also has Colette Hiller, who I would love to go on this podcast, but I don't know if it's going to happen because she's kind of dropped off the radar, who is Sergeant Farrow, the dropship pilot.
Gotcha.
She didn't get to have as many kick-ass moments, but she's the sheer presence alone is just awesome. But Jeanette Goldstein, it's amazing the film she turns up in.
She's so great.
She's in Titanic as the woman Sing the Lullaby to the Children.
I completely forgot that was her. Yeah.
She's the maid in Fear and Love in Las Vegas.
Yep. She is the foster mother in Terminator 2.
Exactly. So we can just make a game of what.
You could do a podcast just about her movies.
We see, we're just writing the future episodes as we go here.
Hey.
We're sorted
Why
now.
not?
The next 50 episodes, we're just completely sorted.
Just go through our IMDb list, one movie at a time.
So, but yeah, that's, I think we have pretty much exhausted Starship Troopers. If you haven't seen it, definitely go and watch it.
Absolutely.
I know it's on your letterboxes in your top 5.
Oh yeah, it is my number 4 movie of all time for me.
I've not put it on mine. I unfortunately had to omit it for other things on there, so shame on me.
It's a hard. Do you have like your definitive ranking of your favorite movies?
I have a rotating top 50.
Yeah.
There's certain films which always are at the top. Things like Destroyer Monsters, Freaks is always at the top. Clockwork Orange, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill 1. There's certain films which always are at the top, and then there's got the others which sort of shift around in places as sort of my mood towards directors change and stuff. Yeah,
my top 5 stay very tight, and then 6 to 10 rotate, like the order switches a bit, but yeah, I hear you.
Cool. Right. Well, on to our final section of the podcast tonight, which we're calling What's in the Box?
What's in the box?
Thank you.
Oh, God. No. What's in the box?
Where each week each edition, should I say, I'm going to be inviting our guests to promote something of interest to themselves. And this week, Emily, have you got something for us?
Sure. I have a recommendation of a movie that I think more people need to revisit.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Recently, my husband is a very big fan of this movie. I had not watched it since VHS, 1993 or 4 or so. But we sat down and watched it. We actually recorded a podcast for another podcast on it, so I can promote them as well. And the movie was Dr. Giggles.
Okay.
Now, what's your experience?
I've heard of it, but I haven't actually seen it.
So Dr. Giggles was 1992. It was a theatrical horror release. Larry Drake plays a, mad slashing doctor. And 1992 was a weird time for horror movies. The slasher craze had died. There was no real definitive style of early 90s horror, I don't think. And this movie comes out. This movie, it is a horror comedy. It is completely a comedy. It follows all the beats of a slasher, but is joking the entire time. It's really funny. It's really clever. It's really well made. And I don't think anybody got it when it came out. When it came out, I think everybody treated it like a bad horror movie.
Yeah.
The director did not make any. He mostly works in TV, and I don't think he made any more theatrical releases. And it's just a shame that years later you'd have Scream, and then, everybody could joke about horror. This movie came out at a time when people just didn't get that you could do that yet. And it's really an enjoyable watch. So I'm pushing Dr. Giggles. It is on DVD. It's out there. And if you want to hear us talk more about Dr. Giggles, there's a podcast that I listen to quite a bit called Married with Clickers. And it is a husband and wife podcast. And for October, they had other people also record episodes on different horror movies. So we did the Dr. Giggles episode that will come out very soon if it's not already out by now. So.
Cool. Right. Well, in my own box this week, I'm bringing a film which has been kicking around the sort of Kickstarter campaign circuit at the moment. It's a film called Mermaid Down. Basically, it's another horror film in which a mermaid is ripped from the Pacific and has her tail brutally hacked off by a fisherman's axe before she is thrown into a mental home for disturbed women, where, of course, no one believes that she is actually a mermaid. Mm-hmm. Now, as I said, it's an intriguing concept, and obviously one that I'm really glad actually made its target of funding, because I would love to see more. Because if you go on the site, I will put the link on the bottom, you can actually see the sizzle reel, as they call it, which has got some absolutely great footage on there. and it does make it seem like it's going to be a very dark sort of horror. And it's a little frustrating because the only sort of praise that it gets, it pops up with these little quotes, are from the screenwriting competition that it was taken from. And it's directed by Jeffrey Grillman, who is a first-time director, and it's co-written by a clinical psychologist by the name of Dr. Kelly Lauren Baker, which adds a air of authenticity to it.
Sure.
But when they're doing the reel to it, and I don't want to obviously take anything away from the film, but I have to say that Grillman does not come off as the most exciting filmmaker. He's
no Paul Verhoeven, is what you're saying?
No, he doesn't. He's not excited. He's not like leaping around and making scary faces or anything. Like, if you watch any of the making of footage for Starship Troopers special, you get to watch. See how he does the brain bug, especially using a broom. That's pretty inspired.
Oh yeah, in Starship Troopers, apparently they didn't have giant bugs to chase them. Paul Verhoeven would like pick up a boom mic and chase them and try to like scream at them. That's how he got the performances.
That's what we like. We like that that hands-on style of filmmaking. And again, Dr. Baker does a lot of the sort of talking on it, and she seems to be on the impression that the only mermaid movies that have come out are sort of like the cute and cuddly mermaid movies, like The Little Mermaid and Splash. There's no mention of like The Odyssey. There's no mention of the likes of She Creature, which is the only other mermaid horror film I could think of. I don't know if you can think of any other, Emily.
Well, there's a merman in Cabin in the Woods.
There is, which he's so desperate to see, and I'm sure probably didn't want to see by the end of that film.
Oh, at least he got to see him.
Cabin in the Woods, that's a film for another podcast, and I'm sure it is on the list. Another film which, if you haven't seen it, go and see it.
Certainly.
Again, the film is looking like it's going to be very dark. It's not going to be a big action film. It's going to be very more of a psychological horror. And don't ask me, I'm still not sure the logistics of you chop off a mermaid's tail and she still has her legs. I'm not sure how that's going to actually work, but just from the reel alone, it does look like it's going to be interesting.
It's a great premise, and it's a very fresh premise too.
It is. I think we've overworked vampires. We've certainly overworked zombies.
Yes.
What sort of subgenre can we be doing? I mean, slashers again are overdone.
Find a new monster, find a new... I mean, based on that premise too, it sounds almost like there's something really, like you said, there's a psychologist on writing staff, and that she's sent to an asylum. Seems like there could be a lot of like female hysteria aspect played into it. So it sounds very promising, I'd say.
So, but no, it's certainly, as I said, it'd be nice to see another mermaid horror film.
Sure.
Obviously, we've got Cabin in the Woods, had a merman. We had a She Creature, which again was a killer mermaid, which was fun. But as I said, I think it'd be nice to have something a bit more fresh, because the horror sort of genre, I think, with more sort of stigma around straight to DVD being now taken away, the market's become way too flooded. And it's sad to see that even though the market's been flooded, the certain sort of subgenres still not been touched. We've not really had many werewolf movies, for example. We've not really had many witch movies.
Yep.
I think what's the last sort of witch movie of note I would say would be The Craft.
Yeah. Well, Lords of Salem was pretty witchy.
Again,
it was a lot of things.
Rob Zombie's. I know Udo Kier's now refusing to work Rob Zombie because he shoots so much footage.
And
then has to edit it down.
Out,
that's why he becomes also confused. And that was obviously the problem with House of a Thousand Corpses, which was him just being overexcited. And then obviously did Devil's Rejects, which was more focused and a lot more fun. I think more so on the second time, when I knew what he was sort of aiming for. He wasn't like trying to aim for that sort of everything's not black and white. It's sort of more shades of grey.
I appreciated the ambition in Lords of Salem, and I didn't hate it. I really didn't hate Sherry Moon Zombie in it. I feel like everybody just used her as a punching bag, but I didn't think she was the problem in that movie.
I mean, what did you think of his Halloween?
Well, okay.
So I'm going to talk about it in an upcoming Lambcast, we're doing the Halloween franchise. So.
Oh, okay. I'll give my my 2 cents. I like that he was taxed with remake Halloween. I really like that he tried to do something different. And then he had 40 minutes left, and then he just did a greatest hits of the first film. So I didn't particularly like Halloween. I won't say I liked the first hour because it was kind of miserable to sit through because it's just unpleasant. But I appreciate what he tried to do. Halloween 2, I think, is a fascinating bad movie.
Yeah.
I went to see it in the movie there. I remember we snuck into it. I had seen Final Destination 4, and we were drinking during that movie. And then we snuck into Halloween 2, and I was in, like, such a good mood. I just seen Final Destination 4. I'm all happy. I still have some of my, like, Snapple and vodka left. And, like, 10 minutes into it, I remember looking at my friend Erica, and we were like, this is not going to be good, and my alcohol's getting warm. This is going to be really, really a painful 2 hours. And I think that movie ended. I have a theory that there was a different killer. I don't think Michael Myers existed in that movie. I think it was all in Laurie's head. But the movie doesn't ever try to do that. I've seen the extended cut, and it makes just as little sense. It's like an aggressively bad movie where I think he was almost trying to make a bad movie to a certain extent, where I think he didn't want to make any more, so he figured I'm just going to make it as, like, ridiculous as I can.
I think he's always been sort of like the fact that if I don't make it, someone else is going to make it.
And that's kind of what I feel like he felt with that movie. But there was still a way to do something with it that wasn't that.
Yeah, it's I mean, the commentary, again, Rob Zombie's commentaries are absolutely brilliant. If you get into this, make sure you listen to the commentary. The Halloween one especially, because when he's talking about the kid, the young Michael Myers bludgeoning the kid with the log, he's like, oh yeah, nice kid. No coordination, but nice kid.
Nice.
But he is such a light guy. He's so lighthearted and like such a fun guy. And obviously you see him as his musical career, and obviously you see the films he's making. And again, like Clive Barker, you realise that this is sort of his therapy, and that he doesn't need to be dark in real life because he gets all his darkness out through his art, and that leaves him free to just be, Mr. Joe Cool Blog.
Yeah, and I like those kind of directors because I think that's kind of like what I would be like. Like, I love horror movies, but I'm a pretty sunny person in real life, and I like when you can get that from filmmakers.
Yeah.
And he seems to have a good relationship with his actors. Brad Dourif and Daniel Harris in Halloween 2 are so good, and they're in their own movie, and all of their scenes are fantastic, and I care, and it's important and emotional. And then the rest is just poop being thrown at me. It's a weird thing. And I would love in, like, 10 years when he's completely, like, when that's totally behind him, for him to really talk about what went down on that movie.
I think it's, has he got anything on the director's slate coming up, or has he just gone back to his music now?
I don't know. I feel like it's gone back and forth with him. Like, he was going to remake The Blob at one point, then that fell through. It seems to keep going back. He'll direct more. I'm sure he will. And I think he still has good movies in him. I'm rooting for the guy. I am.
Oh. Right. Well, that just about wraps up this premiere edition of the podcast. I'd like to say thank you again to Emily for coming along and joining me this evening's recording.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we'll get you back on for a future edition if you want to come back.
I'm around.
We'll put on a spread, put some sandwiches out. Be good.
Nice. Put invite some Clancy Brown over. Have a party.
Be good. But again, thank you for listening, and until next time, keep it strange. I lost my heart to a Starship Trooper.